And what I realized is we are prioritizing something in our life. The question is, are we prioritizing with intentionality,
Yeah.
right? Like, are we actually prioritizing things that matter?
Hello and welcome to Center for Victory's podcast of Your Best Day Yet. At Center for Victory, we're here to help unlock, reinforce, and enrich relationships through personal and professional development. I'm Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer here at the Center for Victory. With me is no stranger to the podcast. What has developed into one heck of a friendship. We've got Mr. Andrew Reichert joining us, uh, CEO, head Rhino, I should say. Is that okay to say, Andrew,
Let's go. I
of
like it.
Birgo Realty? And guys, we're going to be so welcome first, Andrew. I'm just excited. I'm ready to grab the book and dig in. But welcome to the show again, and great to have you.
Yeah. Eric, I'm honored to be here. Grateful to be your friend. And I've really enjoyed spending time with you, listening to your podcast, and just journeying alongside you. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, maybe we'll have time, if we have time, talk a little bit about Glacier and the fun time we had there. That was a great opportunity with to have with you and your wife, and to
Oh,
have my
yeah.
wife there too. So we'll talk about that. But guys, here's what I want to talk about today: priorities on purpose. This is Andrew's new book that just come out. It's actually even on Audible too, and read by the author. That was the first time I knew somebody that well,
Yeah.
Andrew, that I've listened to Audible. So
Yeah.
it was pretty cool. So Blueprint
You're
for
not in.
Living with Clarity and Focus. That's pretty good. Very practical. Uh, Very practical. A lot of stuff we've had conversations on. So it was real cool to kind of go back and forth in the book on it. It's very easy to read. For those of you that may like, "Ah, I don't want to read a book." Very easy to read. I got through it all in one day.
Yep.
Why'd you write it? Like, just let's start there. I mean, I know we're not
Whew.
supposed to ask why, but what was the motivation for writing the book?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question. And to answer the question, I do have to back up a little bit. And just in case other folks did not listen to the last time I was on your podcast, I probably just have to tell a little bit of my story. Is that okay?
That is absolutely perfect.
Great. So, I talk about this in the book, but I talk about life's adversity in the book. So for me, it was getting expelled from high school, a few years after college, getting locked up in Manhattan. And then my first year in a marriage, getting diagnosed with cancer. Any one of those is like a life-changing adversity. And you add three of them in, and those aren't the only three stories. And um, what I found was I was for most of my life kind of like a boat without a rudder, just drifting, going whichever way the waves tossed and turned me. And life's adversity often would really throw me off. It would really challenge me and caused me to ask those deeper questions of like, why am I here? And what am I doing with my life? And who am I really? And so that was the beginning of the book, but it took me, I would say, about a decade to actually understand and develop the principles that are in the book. And so the principles are actually quite simple, and none of them did I invent myself. It's me taking all the best of what I learned over the past 10 years and just packaging it into a system. And so what I tell people is, we run our business on the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS.
Hmm.
And I say, look, you got to run your business on EOS and run your life on ROS. We call it the Rhino operating system. And so that's why I appreciate you calling me the Chief Rhino. I love the Rhino because it's a symbol of two things, and this is really what the book's about. The first is resilience. Rhinos have this 2-inch thick skin. They're super resilient. And then the second is alignment. Rhino is charging, but you have to aim before you charge. And so I was like a Rhino going all over for most of my life. And so the combination of resilience and alignment is really what the book's all about.
Yeah, and that's what really stuck out to me, first and foremost, was alignment. Getting aligned with, let's just not willy-nilly going through life. I mean, we had shared stories, similar experiences. People that watch the show know a lot about my experience and just what happens when you get aligned with certain things, especially your purpose, right?
Mhm.
And what was that like for you? Because I want to give you some credit on here of defining that for people, like, or helping people define it and look at it a little bit differently.
I mean, from my standpoint, there's really two answers to the
Mhm.
purpose question. The first was like a um, sort of a crisis moment of, I'm in jail, I'm laying on the floor, concrete floor in a holding cell with 20 guys, worst possible conditions. And I heard this voice inside me say, Andrew, you were made for something more than this. And that was the beginning of me asking the question, okay, well, what was I then made for? Like, why am I here? What is
Yeah.
this all about? And up until that point, it was, hey, I gotta, make money and be successful and right. Like I was just chasing all of these things that ultimately I've come to learn are just shallow versions of purpose. And so that was what I would say is kind of my crisis moment. But then there was this more ongoing development of understanding my purpose and really one that is iterative. So that version is a more complex life plan that I've developed that has an envisioned future and a purpose in every single one of my life accounts. So I have a purpose as a father, and I have a purpose as a husband. I have a purpose as a business owner, and a purpose for myself as from a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual standpoint. And so all of those together combine to basically become what I view as my purpose today.
Yeah, and I like how you like break up the book. So is it okay to give people a sneak peek here?
Yeah. Oh, please
Because
do.
because I think even when I uh wrote a review for you after I read it, and I was like, man, like very practical. Like this is what I want, right?
Hmm.
And that's why like something like EOS worked for us too. It was like it's practical. It's like not up here. It's like, okay, what do I need to do? Like tell me what to do. And you actually look, if you look at the table of context, folks, chapter one is the who component, know yourself. Chapter two, the why component, prioritize purpose. Chapter three, the what component, pursue convergence. Chapter four, the how component, execute rhythmically. And then the last chapter, the when component, optimize energy. Boom, there you go. Like you just have to follow it. Like if even if you just took one of those, Andrew, it would be impactful for somebody that wasn't doing anything. It's powerful.
That's exactly what I found. And thank you. I appreciate you kind of giving the overview of it. And what I found is that there's a sequential nature to it, but there's also this iterative nature. It's almost like a wheel that you can kind of go around multiple times. So one of my mentors helped me really understand this concept of starting with the who component, starting with who. So Rick Newton, he's working on a book actually called Start with Who. And the reality is, I think a lot of people try to understand their purpose or they try to understand their what exactly they're supposed to be doing, their job or whatever, before they really understand their who, like
Mhm.
their unique DNA, what is put inside each and every person, never before been created, never again going to be created, that makes that person so unique. And I know, you and I, Eric, love geeking out around the predictive index and the values index and the attribute index and all the various assessments and um, I've just found that each of those gives a little bit of a window into that answer.
Mhm.
And so really understanding that is the hard work that you got to start with. And then you can understand your purpose and your why, and then your what, and then how to execute on it, and then when to execute on it. But then once you've done that circle, it keeps going. It's iterative. Doing all of that helps you better understand your who, which gives you more meaning and flavor and insight into your purpose. And it just keeps going around.
Yeah, I think in the book, if I can remember correctly, I mean, I like some of the stats you put in there. even around figuring out who you are, right? Just doing that, right? Didn't you say that? Didn't you say somewhere in the book there? Um, when we look at kind of who we are and then start to align, a lot of the things that we see with many people nowadays, like anxiety and depression and things like that, those things go away. And that's what I've experienced in my life. And that's the joy I get when I do those things for people, when I'm coaching people or training people on the various number of assessments. I think that's such a thing. And I don't know if I know you agree with this, but that you would say, hey, look, like if you're going to do something first, that's why I loved how you started the book with like, know yourself, like take some time. And you're just an absolute love it though. Love it. It's a compliment. An absolute junkie with assessments. And you do those things. You take each apart. You've asked me about others that I might not even know about. It's like, hey, do you know this? Do you know this? And it's like to just be alone and think, okay, is there a one other marker where I could learn something, right?
Yeah, and by the way, I think I think assessments serve a very important purpose. They're not the end all be all. Sometimes people beat people over the head with
Right.
assessments and put people in boxes because of assessments. But yeah, I am a self-proclaimed assessment junkie just because every one I take, I get a little bit more of a window into myself, just a little bit more of a picture, a little bit more self-awareness. And it's not even the assessment itself, it's the assessment applied, right? Like
Yes.
it's you gotta like then once you know the what, you've got to ask the so what and then the now what, right? And that's really the application of the assessment. So I love them. I mean, I could talk about them all day.
Yeah. I mean, you also pointed out it's not only it's self-assessment too, but it's also the people around us. Like, what do you think? Like, it's the assessment of them pouring into us and giving us feedback. And that can, I think we don't ask for it enough. And two, I think when it's given, we take it for granted and don't like that's one thing I don't think we apply. It's like, well, maybe they have a point. Not
Yeah.
everybody's right, but I think the people that are in that inner circle
Oh yeah.
like say, hey, look, maybe try this or that. I know I've found that to be extremely helpful when I look at things as well.
Yeah, they're just going to see stuff that we might not be seeing and help us see our blind spots, help us understand that every strength has a shadow side.
Yeah.
And, we got to understand what those are and be cognizant of them and manage around them.
Yeah, I like the examples that you gave too, because I know the people that you were talking about in the book. It's just like you're reading it, and it's like we've had this discussion, we've had this discussion.
Right.
It was
Right.
good, and I say that because as a person reads it, Andrew, again, it's practical. Here's the person. Here's what happened. Here's what we do for, you talked about you and Shannon, your wife. It's like, yeah, like I need a practical explanation of this, and you did a great job at that. But the why component, like what's that all about? So we went from the who component to the why component, and you said prioritize purpose. Give us a little insight into that and what you meant by that.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because I think there's two pieces there because there's two words.
Yep.
It's one thing to know your purpose. It's another thing to prioritize it, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so in the book, what we talk about, and again, I can't take credit for anything in there. This comes from Michael Hyatt, and I went through 3 years of coaching with him and his organization, Full Focus. And what I realized is we are prioritizing something in our life. The question is, are we prioritizing with intentionality,
Yeah.
right? Like, are we actually prioritizing things that matter? I've heard somebody say you can actually figure out what matters to a person by looking at their calendar and their checkbook. And it's true. Like it says a lot about what we prioritize. And so from my standpoint, I have 10 life accounts. We call them life priorities in the book.
Mm.
But it's really I've got these accounts of being, like physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. These accounts of relating, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a friend, I'm in social circles. And then these accounts of doing. So it's work and avocation and financial. And oftentimes folks prioritize, I mean, the one thing that they pay attention to is work, right? It's like, I got to earn an income or else I got nothing else. So that's like number one. And then maybe they prioritize a few key relationships. And beyond that, so many people neglect the accounts of being, their own physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual
Mhm.
health. And so I try to flip that thing upside down. Now, everybody has different priorities. So I don't want to tell anybody this is what your priorities should be. But I do know that when I personally focus on my physical, my mental, my emotional, my spiritual health, I can show up as a better person
Yeah.
in my work and in my relationships. So that's why it's all about prioritizing your purpose, not just understanding it.
Yeah, which is a great point. And then the next step, Andrew, is what you refer to as the what component. And under that, you like pursue convergence. Like, what
Yep.
do you mean by that? Well, of course, I know what you mean by that, but for our listeners and viewers, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Yeah. So convergence, again, I want to give credit where credit is due. This came from a couple different sources. So there's a book, I think it's called The Making of a Leader, and he talks about convergence in there. Now, he talks about it a little bit differently than how I define it in the book, but it's like this process that you go through to find the convergence kind of your life. And in the case of our book, we came up with this framework. This actually is a little bit proprietary and unique. But convergence for us is the convergence of three things. It's what are you passionate about? What are you proficient in doing? And what is your purpose? So it's those three P's. Um, and I really loved, again, at Full Focus with Michael Hyatt, the passion and the proficiency come together for what they call the desire zone. So it's like figuring out, hey, what is your desire zone, but how does that align with your purpose? So the convergence of those three things, it's your purpose, it's your passion, it's your proficiency zone. That's what we call convergence. And that's really what you got to pursue. And the reason it's the word pursue is because it is genuinely just a pursuit. You never arrive. You're never 100% there. It's about pursuing and pushing more and more of yourself into that convergence zone day in and day out.
Yeah, good. And then the next one, the how component. All right, the how component is execute rhythmically. What do you mean
Yeah.
by that?
Yeah. So again, you can execute like non-rhythmically. So you can like just kind of do things, right? Or you can execute with a rhythm. So this one really, I've got to give EOS credit because basically all I've done. So EOS is this great system where you set a 10-year target, a 3-year picture, 1-year goals, 90-day rocks, weekly outcomes. Um, I've taken that and I've basically combined that with my personal execution system, which for the longest time I was using Michael Hyatt's Full Focus Planner. I highly recommend that, particularly for anybody that likes a paper planner. I've since developed my own electronic version of that, but it's just doing that same exact thing. It's like, hey, what are the three things that I need to do today to get to my weekly outcomes, the 2, 3 things I need to do this week, to get my 2 to 3 big things done this quarter, to hit my annual goals, to basically get to my vision for my life. That's really what execute rhythmically is all about.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And probably a little bit of my favorite, but I'm a little bit of bias on this, is the last chapter there, which is the when component. And it's all about optimizing energy. You and I have
Yeah.
had so many discussions about this and have
Oh yeah.
shared all of those little tidbits. And you want to talk about, we talked about getting to know yourself and yeah, I think both of us would be considered junkies here. Like, what knob can I turn? Is there just one little piece that'll give me another 1%? So
Yeah.
I'm thank you for putting that in the book, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I think a lot of people, especially the people that I think will read this, need to hear that. So, what do you mean by it first? Like, if give us a like of a rundown of that.
Yeah. Well, I think this is one that's often overlooked. And so I'm glad that you like it and you and I talk about it and it's something that we're aligned on. But the reality is, I think, particularly as leaders, now many of us are leaders in our various spheres of influence, maybe as again, a father or a husband or a business leader, whatever it may be. But I think our energy is one of the key things that we bring to those relationships. And like, I don't know about you, but my kids know when I show up at the end of the day and I'm exhausted, they know it. And if I can just show up after work and roll around on the floor with them and throw them around and be energetic. Like that's what I want. when people ask, "Hey, you're doing all this physical activity. What's your goal?" Like, I want to be able to lift my great great grandkids off the ground,
We both,
right?
brother.
Like,
Yes.
yeah, like it's all about functional health for me. And I think that's where the energy piece comes in. So, there's a book called The Power of When. The sleep doctor, he talks about how he, um, recognizes that people are different, what are called chronotypes. It's really just we all have different genetics that make us either night owls, or he calls them wolves, or early birds, he calls them lions, we're all just wired a little differently. So it's about how can we actually optimize our energy, and there's so much that we can do to not just optimize our energy, but to optimize our days so that our
Yeah.
days match our optimal energy patterns.
Yeah, it's guys, if this does not pique your interest, one, you're probably watching the wrong podcast, and two, I just don't know. But this is fantastic, Andrew. And look at this, guys. It's not that thick. It's just jam-packed with one
Yeah.
thing after another. And I love the title, Priorities on Purpose, a blueprint for living with clarity and focus. I mean, guys, when you get aligned around some of these things, and that's what this book will help you do. I mean, it's like I said, it took me only a day to read it, stayed stuck in it. And even though I knew some of the stories, Andrew, it was good to revisit them again and understand. So thank you for writing this. Last thoughts. If somebody says, should I pick this up or not? What would you tell them?
Yeah. So I would basically say, I mean, you held it up, but here it is. And the hard copy, I mean, you can see how thin it is. So it's a 3 hour read, or if you want to listen on audiobook, hour and a half on Audible at 2x, right? And it's in my own voice. So I really think that everybody runs their life on some kind of an operating system.
Mhm.
So it's the same thing with EOS. Everybody runs their business on some kind of an operating system, whether you've named it or not. And this is just all about getting your life aligned and getting everybody rowing in the same direction, and getting you rowing in the direction that you want to go. So you can absolutely not read it, and maybe you'd be better off with that hour and a half back in your life. But I got to tell you, my perspective is, I wrote this book to myself 20 years ago. These are the things I wish I had known 20
Yes.
years ago. And so I think it's a low risk, high reward endeavor to read a book like this. And I hope it serves the listeners. I hope it serves people. Um, I don't care if I, sell 0 copies. I just want to impact one life, one person read it, have their life changed. That's really all I care about.
Yeah, and that's good. That is very low risk, very high reward, folks. I would agree 100%. Again, the book, Priorities on Purpose, a blueprint for living with clarity and focus by our dear friend Andrew Reichert. As I ask all of my guests, Andrew, and you probably have answered this before, but give us another cool answer. We always ask everybody because the show is called Your Best Day Yet. How would you define that for you? What's your best day look like?
Yeah, my best day is a day. Well, I hate to give a cop out answer because it's kind of like sounds like I'm promoting my book, but it is a day where my life is in alignment.
Yeah.
So, my best day yet is when I'm aligned physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, my 4 accounts of being, but I'm doing those with the people that I love, my wife, my 3 daughters,
Mm,
my friends, folks like you, and I'm doing it to carry out my purpose vocationally. So I believe work is good. A lot of people think that there's a perspective that, hey, we just got to avoid work. Let's just work so that I can retire, go play golf. No offense, by the way, to people who are retired and play golf, just not my perspective.
right.
So my best day yet is not one where I'm just like never working again. It's
Right.
me being in alignment with my purpose, personally, professionally, spiritually. Everything is aligned. So that's really my best day yet.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks. Figured you'd say something like that. I was hoping you'd say something like that because that matches everything we'd be talking about.
Yeah.
Before I forget, I almost forgot, and I would have had to apologize to you. There are other resources with the book. Can they can get to those resources without the book?
Yeah. So if you go to rosjourney.com, so that's Rhino Operating System Journey.com. There's a bunch of resources out there. We've got a bunch of free resources out there too. We're launching a course, launching an app. Some of the stuff, depending on when this airs, may or may not be ready. But there's a ton of resources, a whole workbook that goes alongside with the book as well. Tons of tools. I mean, really, just want to get this stuff into people's hands to serve as many people as possible.
All right, well, folks, tune in because more of this stuff. I'll have Andrew back on. I just think this is great stuff, and he and I have shared lots of stories about things that we just got done talking about, and it's definitely needed in everything that we do, in every aspect of what we do, and just not enough people have it. So if you could spread the word and help us out as well, we'd greatly appreciate that. But Andrew, thanks for being on. I know you're a busy dude, but thanks for coming on, talking about the book a little bit. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Audible, folks, and rosjourney.com. You can find Andrew on all kinds of social media as well. If you have any questions and can't somehow get connected with him, you always know where to go. You can find us at centerforvictory.com and we'll dial you into him. Any last thoughts?
Eric, just before we conclude, we had talked about Glacier a little bit at the beginning of this call, and we didn't get to revisit that. But
Yeah.
just for your listeners, I want to just kind of flip the script and
Okay.
give you a little bit of promotion on that. We had such an amazing time at Glacier. If anybody is considering any of your AMP adventures, I would just highly recommend them to any of your listeners. Getting a chance to be with you and in the evenings, my wife and I, and you and your wife, working through some of that personal, professional development stuff really was life changing. And more importantly, just the camaraderie that we built, hiking those big hikes together, tackling adventures together. It really was my highlight of last year, and so highly recommend anybody thinking about those to commit and to do that with you.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yeah, and it was a good time, man. It was a super, super good time. Like those are
Yeah,
things, you know, we've got stories, we've got inside jokes, man. I mean, I
yeah,
love it. I love it. I love it. And we are working on getting you up here. So
yeah.
I know Shannon's gonna ask me again if I don't do something. So thanks a lot, Andrew. Appreciate it, guys. Priorities on purpose. Go out and get it. It's well worth the read. So thanks, Andrew. Guys, that's all for today. Appreciate you tuning in, listening, watching. And again, centerforvictory.com. And just remember, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make this your best day yet. We'll see you soon.